Welcome to today's Explainer. Look, we're diving into something incredibly heavy, but absolutely crucial today. We're going to unpack two really tragic family massacres from 2026. And the goal here? It's not just to recount what happened. It's to piece together the facts and uncover the deeply hidden realities of domestic violence that allow these tragedies to occur. We're going to look closely at the timelines and the data to spot the patterns that, honestly, almost always go unseen.
Okay, let's dive right into this chilling reality. Sometimes the most perfect images hide the absolute darkest realities. It's wild to think about, but the homes and neighborhoods that seem totally put together, the ones that literally look picture perfect from the outside, can actually be concealing some devastating secrets right behind closed doors. Section 1, the illusion of safety.
So we've really got to look at this massive gap between what the public sees and what's actually going on in private. Back in 2026, Gwinnett County, Georgia, was known as this booming, peaceful area. In fact, local officials were cautiously celebrating a whopping 25% drop in homicides. And hey, that perceived safety felt like tangible, real progress. But here's the catch. That 25% drop totally masked a hidden danger. There was this persistent, lingering pattern of domestic family conflicts. We aren't talking about random street violence here. We're talking about relationship breakdowns escalating completely out of sight. It was a pattern that never actually went away, no matter what those big picture crime stats suggested.
Moving on to Section 2, the Gwinnett County Massacre.
This specific tragedy centers around a close-knit, extended Indian immigrant family living together on Brook Ivy Court in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Now, this wasn't just some sudden, out-of-the-blue, impulsive act. Just look at how this escalated. Exactly 13 days before the tragedy, police were actually called to this very home for a family dispute. A report was filed, sure, but no arrests were made. Then, fast forward to earlier in the day on January 23rd. A really intense argument breaks out between a husband and wife over in Atlanta. That conflict gets into a car, travels 30 miles, and then at 2 a.m., the suspect shows up at that Lawrenceville home armed and with clear intent. In just a devastating sequence of events, 4 people, Mimu, Gaurav Kumar, Nidhi, and Harish lost their lives in the one place they were supposed to be safe.
Now, what's really interesting and heartbreaking about this slide is why these warning signs often get ignored. In the days right before the shooting, a neighbor actually saw Mimu outside, pacing around and crying on the phone. The neighbor totally sensed something was wrong, but they hesitated to step in. Why does that happen? Well, it really comes down to complex systemic barriers. Things like cultural expectations to just keep matters private or the massive fear of community judgment. There were language barriers and deep concerns about immigration status, and you basically build a wall of silence, which means, tragically, these glaring warning signs just go unaddressed.
Inside the home, the reality was just unimaginably terrifying. The initial reports painted this incredibly harrowing picture. A 12-year-old girl, acting with just unbelievable bravery, gathers her 7-year-old and 10-year-old siblings and hides them inside a dark closet. As the violence completely shatters her family right outside that door, this incredibly brave kid manages to pick up a phone and dial 911. But as we so often see when we analyze these kinds of cases, those first reports rarely give us the whole picture. The slow reveal didn't actually happen until court testimony in March of 2026. And the truth? It's even more agonizing. That 12-year-old didn't just hide. She was right there. She literally watched her father, Vijay Kumar, pull 2 pistols from his pockets, one in each hand, and open fire. Right in the middle of all that chaos, she actually ran toward him to beg him to stop before retreating to make that 911 call. So we're left with this jarring ultimate contrast. To the public, looking at their Facebook photos, you'd see the ultimate immigrant success story, right? Holidays, family celebrations, the American dream coming to life after years of hard sacrifice. But the grim legal reality is a completely different story. Vijay Kumar was tracked down and arrested in the woods behind his house. Today, he's facing malice murder charges, and the state of Georgia is actively seeking the death penalty. Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. The silent Lakewood tragedy. Look, this isn't just some isolated phenomenon. Actually, just 8 days earlier, on January 15th, 2026, a completely different case unfolded over in Lakewood, California, with the Alfaro family. Now, unlike the Gwinnett case, where police had been called before and there was visible tension out in the street, 52-year-old Hector Alfaro had absolutely no police reports, 0 restraining orders, no documented history of violence whatsoever.
To his neighbors, and even to his own extended family, his persona was that of a devoted father and provider. Yet the reality was devastating violence that just erupted without a single visible warning sign.
The actual sequence of events on Lurley Avenue happened so incredibly fast, and it was entirely contained inside the home. Early in the morning, 19-year-old Desiree wakes up to the terrifying sound of gunfire. Tragically, her 48-year-old mother, Roxana, and her 17-year-old sister, Sienna, are both fatally shot right in their bedrooms. Hector then confronts Desiree. He raises the weapon, shoots, and misses. Immediately after, he turns the gun on himself, taking his own life. In just a matter of minutes, Desiree went from sleeping in her bed to becoming the sole survivor of her immediate family.
I honestly can't overstate this point. No police reports, no restraining orders, no documented domestic violence. In Lakewood, there was no open file. There weren't any red flags that could have given anyone, not local law enforcement, not a social worker, a chance to step in and intervene. Whatever intense pressure or dark despair Hector was dealing with, it built up completely, 100% in silence.
Which brings us to Section 4, Understanding Familicide. Okay, we need to take a step back from the timelines for a second. Let's look at the psychology and sociology to try and understand the why behind both of these drastically different cases. First off, let's define the term itself. Familicide is the killing of multiple family members by a single perpetrator, which is then often followed by the perpetrator's suicide. By grounding these intensely emotional stories from Gwinnett and Lakewood in this clinical reality, we can kind of start to wrap our heads around the behavioral framework experts use to make sense of the unthinkable. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what researchers are consistently finding. When we look at the demographics, perpetrators are predominantly male, and there's a really high likelihood they'll use firearms. On a psychological level, they often view their family as literal extensions of themselves, basically this twisted belief that if they're going down, everyone tied to them has to go down too. But crucially, we've got to talk about mental health here. You see, male depression doesn't always look like typical visible sadness or crying. Actually, it frequently shows up as withdrawal, irritability, or just a total flattening of engagement. It's this hidden struggle that is just far too easy for loved ones to entirely miss. Section 5, Surviving and Finding Help.
While we spend a lot of time analyzing the perpetrators to understand the mechanics of these crimes, our focus absolutely has to shift toward the incredible resilience of the survivors and how important intervention really is. The burden of survival is just profound. For that 12-year-old girl in Georgia or 19-year-old Desiree in California, survival isn't some uplifting cinematic triumph. It's a heavy, lifelong burden. It's the agonizing act of carrying the aftermath and having to move forward simply because continuing is the only option left. They have to live every single day with what they witnessed and with the massive voids left behind.
And because the cost of all this is so immense, we have to talk about prevention. 988. That is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's totally free, it's 100% confidential, and the best part is it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from absolutely anywhere in the United States. If you, or maybe someone you know, is exhibiting those quiet, easily missed signs of withdrawal or despair, dialing those 3 numbers is the very first step. We also have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. And listen, this is so crucial. You do not have to be in immediate physical danger to make this call. Seriously. They are there for those in-between moments. If you notice a pattern of escalation starting, or even if you just see a neighbor pacing and crying out in the street, there are trained professionals standing by, ready to help you navigate those completely invisible warning signs. So what does this all mean? Well, the big question we have to leave you with today is this. How do we reach the people who are struggling in total silence? The illusion of safety is a powerful thing, but as we've clearly seen, it can literally be shattered in an instant. It's entirely up to us, our communities, to learn how to spot these hidden signs, to challenge the awful stigma around seeking help, and to build a world where someone in a dark crisis reaches for a lifeline instead of a weapon. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Let's keep learning, and please, let's keep looking out for one another.